everybody, this is Zoe and today I am here with the incredible Cassandra Clare. Swordcatcher is finally here. I attended the PR proof event a few months ago and I devoured the book in a day. It was that good. Can you tell us a little bit more about the book itself?
Sure, it takes place in a high fantasy universe, so for the first time for me I'm traveling into a world that I invented completely. It doesn't have any connection to our world, and it follows both a girl who is a doctor and is sort of fighting against the misogyny that says that only men can be doctors in her world, and it also follows the swordcatcher, Kel, he's behind me, who is basically kidnapped from an orphanage when he's only 10 years old, brought to the palace and assigned to be the body double for the Prince, Connor Aurelian, who's over there, and through magic they make him look like Connor. He learns to act like him, behave like him, and his job is basically to stand in for him in any dangerous situation where there might be an assassination. So both Lynn and Connor are sort of put on a collision course to encounter each other in this world of political intrigue and romance and betrayal and swashbuckling and all of that.
It is amazing. I would highly, highly recommend it. After building such an intricate and detailed world for Shadowhunters, did it feel freeing or daunting to introduce this whole new world?
I think initially I thought, oh, this is going to be so easy, I can invent everything, but actually when you're creating high fantasy, you really have to create a world that feels real and hangs together. So then it was incredibly daunting, and I just filled notebooks with lots and lots of notes about, history and world building and boring stuff like the economy and the money and the trade and the all of the just tiny details. I feel like with high fantasy, it's a lot like an iceberg. You see only 10% of it above the surface in the actual book, but you sort of know the 90% that's beneath. So it was definitely a challenge, but now I really love it.
Yeah. So this is your first adult novel. Is there a different writing process to writing adult fiction as opposed to YA?
I mean, process-wise, there were a few things that were different. I think partly because it was adult and partly because it was high fantasy. There was just a lot more to keep track of in terms of extremely complex sort of relationships between people and also the history and what was happening in the world. So I had lots and lots and lots of notes. Whereas the Shadowhunter world is sort of embedded in my consciousness. I've been working on it for so long that I know sort of everything about it is in my head. And this was much more that I had to kind of create and get what was in my head and put it down on paper, and I just filled the table with millions and millions of post-its and scenes and whatnot, and everything was color-coded. It was a very complex process.
Yeah, I'd imagine it's pretty manic everywhere.
Oh my goodness, I have pictures of it. It was so extensive. We had a whole room that was just covered with sort of torn up bits of paper that were color-coded to different characters and scenes and whatnot.
Which countries inspired the 12 charter families? Is there anywhere you travelled in particular that you drew inspiration from?
Well, the 12 charter families were inspired by the history of Venice specifically, which was once ruled by a duke and 12 council members. And I was just really fascinated by the way that the power in that time, in that city, came from money and trade. And so if you were enough of a wealthy merchant, you were just as powerful as a king or a duke. And I think we do see that in Castellane. And then there's sort of reflections of our world in a lot of the different countries that are mentioned. Nyanchens is Russia, Marikand is the Persian Empire, Shenzhou is China, Kutani is Zanzibar, Sarth is Italy. So I think that if you're reading the books, you will sort of get the sort of sense and the references to places that are familiar to us from history.
Yeah. Now, I know the first book has only just been released, but do you have any insight into the RKR King, which is book 2?
Well, I'm working on it now, so I'm sort of in the weeds on the RKR King. I know the first book ends on kind of a brutal cliffhanger.
Yes.
So, so I've had a few people asking me to write, like, I'm sorry in their books. Like, I'm sorry about the cliffhanger. But the next book is scheduled to come out, the RKR King is scheduled to come out in March of 2025. Not that far off, and it picks up 3 months after the end of Swordcatcher and has our characters sort of in the middle of solving the mystery of what sort of happens at the big cliffhanger that happens at the end of Swordcatcher.
Yeah, well, I'm so excited for it. And one final question, which books, fantasy or otherwise, have you read recently that you would recommend?
Oh goodness, I recently reread all of Megan Whalen Turner's The Queen's Thief series, and I had actually started reading those when I was very young, and she's continued writing them, and I think just released a new one, and they're amazing. So if you haven't picked them up and read them because they look like they're a bit younger. They're really not. They're very complex books full of political intrigue, all sorts of, and romance and swashbuckling and all the things that I think that I really love, and I think that you guys would love it too.
Thank you.
So welcome.